With the success of the first Metroid Prime back in 2002, a sequel was clearly warranted. The game that followed asked the question of what else could you do with the new hit formula that the first game introduced. As it turns out, you could explore a lot of new options.
Alex getting glared at aside, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes is basically what happens when you cross a 3D Metroid with a link to the past.
And that is a combo I can get behind.
Of course it is, Mr. Zelda Month. Though, not that I blame you. This is a game where you control Samus as she travels across entire dimensions in a spin on the usual exploration formula. The interconnection between Planet Ether and its counterpart Dark Ether results in a lot of clever and even mind-bending puzzles, ranging from activating objects trapped between dimensions, and even finding ways to access Dark Ether when its doors are blocked by indestructible enemies.
It was never going to match the impact of the first Prime game, and perhaps that takes away a bit of the initial excitement, but as a standalone game, it's one of the finest adventures you can experience on the GameCube. Yes, the graphics aren't too much different, and most of the core mechanics, save for the dark and light beams, are lifted straight from Metroid Prime, but if they worked so well before, there shouldn't be any real reason to fix it. Some of the boss fights can get ridiculously aggravating, and in general the game feels less fair in a lot of places. Seriously, would have loved more places to save, but it goes to show that you can try new things and have them be well implemented and feel natural within your game. Just not all of them. When the Wii came out in 2006, we saw all these different ways that gaming would be revolutionised by its motion controls. Looking back on it now, most of them seem very gimmicky at the time, almost as if they were forcing the new technology into games that didn't really need it. But perhaps the biggest thing to come out of all of this was pointer controls, where shooting a gun in a video game or even navigating a menu suddenly felt very precise and intuitive. And the biggest beneficiary of them all? Metroid Prime 3 Corruption.
Corruption may as well have my favorite controls to any game I've ever played. Holding the Wii Remote and pointing it at the screen allows you to take full command of Samus's arm cannon, and pulling the nunchuck also allows you to pull off some surprisingly physical grappling attacks. This motion control was a neat little trick that added to the illusion behind being a part of the game, and even better is how smooth and intuitive it is. It perfects the lock-on combat system by giving you the choice to center your attacks on a certain target, while also being able to pick off opponents surrounding it. It helped me feel more freedom to fight like how I wanted to, and less like I was a moon orbiting a planet. And then Nintendo added this control scheme to the first two Metroid Primes, and excuse me, I need to change my pants.
You go do that, I'll try and hold all this together.
Like Metroid Prime 2, it suffers a bit from being a little too similar to the game that started the series off on such a strong footing, but unlike Echoes, it had the capacity to upgrade a few aspects that had started to wane 5 years down the road. The graphics have been sharpened up considerably, ever so slightly cheesy but ultimately functional voice acting was added, and Hyper Mode, which converts one of Samus's full energy tanks into Phazon that makes you invincible and considerably more powerful, adds a great deal of self-indulgent alien-killing fun. It's a worthy and groundbreaking finale to one of gaming's greatest trilogies.
And I'm back. Wait a second, you're done, aren't you?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay then. Metroid Prime Trilogy. Get it on the Nintendo eShop now. It's a worthy investment. Just take my word for it and buy it so we can just get this done. Well. Whenever someone talks about atmosphere in video games, Metroid Fusion is always what jumps to my mind first. I talk a lot about how video games are defined by how the player experiences them, and Fusion plays with this idea expertly. The research facility that this game takes place on feels alive. There's always something lurking in the shadows, and then suddenly not. Species evolve, environments get destroyed, and there's a homicidal alien duplicate of Samus that is actively trying to hunt you down! Looking at my last example, there's even a time where you're forced to engage this creature, and all you can do is choose the tools you wish to evade it with, and then do so.
Put simply, Metroid Fusion is a game where one way or another, be it through the music, gameplay or visual design, you will get sucked into the hostile ambience. This is a game that demands you notice it, and one where you'll rarely get bored playing it. The gameplay takes the good things from previous 2D Metroid outings and refines it so well that exploring the laboratory feels very smooth. Granted, the mere presence of the SAX adds a whole new layer of tension, and your progression through this game is anything other than straightforward, but at least it's not the gameplay that's giving you problems.
In comparison to previous titles, Metroid Fusion is more linear, with the story closely interwoven through it with dialogue sequences. While that may sound counterintuitive for a series that builds its entire name off the freedom you get while roaming these huge worlds, each sector of the Space Lab is like a small world in its own right. The right path to go on isn't always clear, especially since certain maps are incomplete, and the same search methods that permeated the series before Fusion still stand, so the game is still very much made in the same spirit. And besides, the story's pretty good too. Samus feels like a character with her own agency, especially in the ending where she basically goes off the grid to decide the fate of the entire universe.
Parts of Metroid Fusion are scarier than a lot of horror games.
Granted, that's not really saying much, since it seems a lot of horror games nowadays are just made for the sole purpose of vying for the attention of high-profile YouTubers.
You don't see too many people playing Metroid Fusion with face cams. I wanna see that shit.
Metroid 1 for the NES was mostly about gameplay. See bad guys, shoot bad guys, explore Bikini Samus the end. Metroid 2 on the other hand took a heavier focus on story, where it's very clear what Samus is trying to do during the game and what she should have achieved by the end. Combine the two ideas and throw them on a more powerful console and you have Super Metroid, a culmination of all the series' already established elements and developed further to push the franchise in a new and extremely exciting direction. The game opens with you fighting Ridley, evacuating an exploding space station, and touching down on the planet Zebus, alone in the rain.
I thought the first level in a game was supposed to ease you into the experience.
Not in this one. See, Super Metroid at almost every opportunity makes it clear that you are always alone and never safe. From there, Super Metroid becomes the stuff of legend, often considered to be one of the greatest video games ever made. This ranges from the improvements on control, the vastly larger world, the varied environments and ambient music, and best of all, the level design. Super Metroid has been long documented as provided the player with incredible freedom, with countless paths they can use to make it from point A to point B. Furthermore, the game knows how to communicate with you through the act of playing it, and in countless points throughout the entire game. It teaches us while paradoxically making us think, I learned that myself! I'm awesome! You brilliant, manipulative bastards! Arguably the perfect way to make a 2D Metroid game.
At which point we arrive at a very difficult question. A question that I'm certain plagued the minds of developers in the years following Super Metroid's 1994 release. How do you improve on a perfect game? The answer's simple really, you don't. You just take it in another direction while somehow making it equally influential. Maybe you could take it from a different perspective or just add a Z-axis. Either way, it was a process that spanned 8 years and skipped an entire console generation. By the time that Metroid Prime was released to the world, something truly incredible had been crafted.
I'm gonna be honest, this is absolutely my personal bias coming into play since Metroid Prime is consistently among my favorite video games ever. Yet, while I believe that the idea of objectivity is kind of a bullshit measurement, I'd say that Metroid Prime and Super Metroid equally deserve this top spot. Metroid Prime has a rich atmosphere akin to Super Metroid, but with different worlds and mechanics that make each game feel alive in its own incredible way. It could easily feel like Metroid Prime is just coming off Super Metroid's heels, but there's enough novel deviations and introductions for it to hold its own. The game's mechanics, like the scan visor, allow you to choose how you experience the game's narrative. You can easily go into the game guns blazing, or you can choose to search for all of the game's hidden lore if you're interested in world building, or feeling like you're on a mission. There are also plenty of small details in the game's environments that are constructive towards you progressing through them. In a recent playthrough, before receiving the boost ball item, I noticed some fish frozen underneath a smooth sheet of ice that would be used to propel me upwards once I got the aforementioned upgrade. Even beyond what the scan says about the smoothness of the ice the fish are trapped in, Noticing the fish draws attention to the strange ice formation, as if it's relevant. It's a game that uses its first-person perspective to strengthen the player's immersion, and I feel the package would be less complete without it.
And yet what puts it above Super Metroid, at least in my eyes, because I'm not as nostalgic towards this game as my associate here, is its later influence and how they were able to take such a well-engineered formula in Super Metroid and translate it into a first-person perspective. The only 2D Metroid game to follow Super Metroid that wasn't a remake was Metroid Fusion, which gained fans for its atmosphere. Whereas Metroid Prime provided a template from the beginning for an entire trilogy of brilliantly made adventure games. That 8-year development time was spent expertly constructing a game engine that would be largely unchanged for the next 5 years worth of Metroid games, while never deviating from what made the Metroid series such a powerhouse for Nintendo. Metroid Prime is a fine example of what kind of game you end up with when effort is poured into it and everyone involved in the process of making it understands exactly what type of game it needs to be.
This has been rabbidluigi.
And this has been the Autark.
And what now, Alex? Are you going to disappear off for like the next year or so?
Not exactly.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much for watching. This topic has kind of been in the works and played around with for some time now. It's been delayed a few times because Alex has got his university things like assignments and exams, but the good news is, he is now on the other side of that. He has now graduated, hence why this project was able to be done. But it also means that you people, his subscribers, can now bug the shit out of him to make more videos. Frankly, it's a part of your briefing as a subscriber to squeeze as much content out of him as humanly possible. So make sure you do that, you know, just fight the good fight. Again, thank you for watching and drive safely.